Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Larry Rhodes.
And I'm Ralph Eisler, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them, and for people curious about living life free of supernatural beings.
This is a call-in show, so please take a note of the number at the bottom of the screen, and feel free to call in at any time during the show.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee monthly activities are on the first and third Sunday mornings. They're usually lectures with a lively roundtable discussion afterwards. The second Sunday is a book club, and the fourth Sunday is a reflections gathering, which is a potluck afternoon meeting at a member's home.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often held at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's Taproom and Pizzeria in the Old City for happy hour, for fun, food, drink, and conversation. Just look for the biggest, loudest table in the main bar area downstairs.
Yeah. So today is Tuesday, October 18th, 2016. In our show today, we'll be talking about the Bible. But first, let's go to an item in the news.
Okay. There is an atheist-led Canadian church which dispenses with the Bible and replaces the Lord's Prayer with a secular invocation. If you've been following this story from Canada, it appears that one of the ministers of a Christian church has come out as an atheist, but continued to preach in the church. The leaders of the church tried to remove her, but her congregation voted to keep her, and now she's holding regular congregations without God. Here's the story. From Canada, a Christian church is being led by an openly atheist minister who has mostly done away with the Bible and replaced the Lord's Prayer with a non-sectarian affirmation.
Okay, well, in a report, the Christian Post said the Reverend Greta Vosper, leader of West Hill United Church of Toronto, Ontario, is now facing the possibility of being defrocked for being an atheist. Andrea Di Pede, spokesperson for the West Hills, said the Christian Post that Vosper has ministered West Hills for several years. She said since the year 2000, the church has seen radical changes, pointing out that worship services at the church have moved away from the language that references God in order to create an environment without barriers to participation.
The services are themed around love, justice, compassionate care, and responsibility, and living in light in a right relationship with ourselves and each other, with others around the world. She said their church doesn't recognize the Bible as more authoritative, I'll get it right in a minute, than other sources, and that some of their members publicly identify as atheists. We rarely read the Bible in our service, and when we do, we read it alongside other sources of inspiration. We draw from many sources, including novels, journal articles, blogs, poems, nonfiction books, memoirs, videos, and music, DePayday said. She described the service in their church as inclusive for people with various beliefs of God and those without belief in God, but who continue to choose value-based living.
So perhaps this will be the future of Christianity, moving away from God worship and replacing it with human compassion, empathy, and shared experience of its members. Well, it works for me.
Well, you don't have to go to Canada for a church like this either. We have a church here in Knoxville called the Sunday Assembly.
Yes.
That meets the fourth Sunday of every month in the downtown area. Do you remember the name of the building?
I don't remember the name of the building, but this is a growing church. It was started by a couple of fellows in England, and it's spread pretty fast around the country for people who like the church experience, but without the supernaturalism.
All around the world.
And of course, we've always had the Unitarian churches or the Unitarian Universalist churches there, which are very much that way.
Right. That's true. They're open and inclusive to all people, all comers, including atheists and other non-believers.
Yeah.
Now, on to the main program.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me find here. Viewers, line is open. I can see the number at the bottom of the screen. If you have any audio trouble, or let us know about it, please. We've been having trouble in the last few episodes of the programs that we broadcast. If you experience audio trouble, please let us know. This is from an article that I wrote recently, and put it on my website, digitalfreethought.com. When I talk to believers, it's amazing the reverence they have for the Bible. It's really moving, the emotion that surfaces when they're on that subject. They say it's literally the most important book in history. It's important because it is written or inspired to be written by the creator of the universe, because it carries the most important message in the history of mankind. They go on and on about its poetry, its beauty, its truth, and about all the guidelines it contains for living a good life. But when I stop them long enough to ask them, how many times have you read it?
Yeah.
More often than not, they say they haven't. And I say, what? And they look embarrassed and squirm a little bit, so of course I bear down. You've just been telling me it's the one and only original book of the creator of the universe. It's the book where you say all of your morals come from, and that I can't even have morals because I don't subscribe to it. And it is written by the one who will make the decision about where you will be spending your eternal life. And you haven't read it?
Right. Just like the comment, the Bible really isn't a book. It's a collection of books.
So it's like a library.
Like a library. It's got a lot of different things in it, certainly. And for those who are put off by trying to read it all the way through one setting, you can certainly read one book or few chapters every night. I heartily recommend that everybody does so. So, going on in the same vein here, if you're talking to the other people, you can say to them, well, this is the book that you bring to government meetings and demand we adhere to and make our lives based on it. This is the book you claim should keep two loving gay individuals from finding fulfillment in marriage. This is the book that you pound when you make fantastic claims about souls, sin, salvation, and the afterlife. And this is the book you claim contains complete and total truth without a single contradiction. But if you try to maintain that, you really haven't read it. So what kind of mental gymnastics does it really take to convince yourself that you don't need to read? If you claim to be a Christian, you claim to love, worship the eternal author, and that you converse with him every day. You claim to love him more than anybody else, including your family. You claim that he watches every move and every single thought you have and judges you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your entire life. But you can't be bothered to read his book. I know atheists who have read it, even if you haven't.
I know atheists that have read it many, many times.
Yeah, well, I have to admit that I went through it in my youth when I was still a Christian, Methodist church there. And, of course, we have people like Billy Graham who writes his column every Sunday, and his whole column and advice is based on what it says in the Bible. He has no other source of information. It's only what is said in the Bible. If you've ever watched Billy Graham preach, he'll get up and say, the Bible says.
Yeah, I've had 50 years of listening to him off and on. I mean, he's been around since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So if you're a Christian and you haven't read the Bible, the next time you pray, you should at least address this little oversight. Ask God to forgive you for your terrible lack of faith, and then get down to reading it. Keep in mind that this is an atheist telling you to read the Bible, not what you'd expect, I bet. When was the last time your preacher told you to read it? Ever?
Yeah.
And you never hear a priest, a Catholic priest, tell you to.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder why not? Could it be that if you did, you might find out that what you hear them preach is an awful lot different than what you'll read in it? There are only about 100 stories from the Bible that preachers will actually preach about on any given Sunday. The rest, well, they're not really for polite company.
Right. Yeah, as you were talking there, some of these just crossed my mind, that I can see that wouldn't really go over too well with little kids in
No.
Sunday school, I'm
No,
afraid.
a lot of it is X-rated.
Yeah, so some things that maybe you didn't know. We'll talk a little bit about those. For instance, did you know that God chiseled out the Ten Commandments twice? And that they aren't the same commandments. In Exodus 20:2-17 are the ones you're familiar with. That in Exodus 34:6-7 he gives another set to replace the first set that was broken by Moses. But they aren't the same. And the second set is the only one referred to in the Bible as the Ten Commandments. And if I remember correctly, that's the one that contains the commandment, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
And other weird ones.
And other weird ones, which is the sole basis for keeping kosher in Jewish religion.
So when you hear somebody say the Ten Commandments, like they're reading it out of the Bible, they're not referring to the Ten Commandments that Judge Roy Moore put in his courthouse. They're slightly different.
Yeah, there are several versions. You even find the Catholics don't like the commandment that says you should not make any graven image, and they split up one of the other ones to make up the 10 and eliminated that one.
Yeah. God condones human sacrifice. In one book, in Judges 11:12, you're familiar with the story of Abraham, where God commanded him to sacrifice his own son, but then send an angel to stop him. And that's, everybody thinks it's a great story, even though a person is willing to kill his own son.
Right, God was just testing Abraham's faith, right.
But have you heard the story of Jephthah? He's an Israelite general who makes a promise to God in order to to win a battle. The results of which are that he has to make a human sacrifice of his only daughter to God. And God doesn't stop him like he did Abraham. No, he has to go through it.
Yeah, it's always puzzled me why God is so interested in blood sacrifices throughout the Old Testament. Maybe people, maybe not so much people, but certainly animals always.
Yeah. And he's supposed to be omniscient too. Remember how Cain slew Abel?
Mm-hmm.
He did it because God preferred his sacrifice, of animal flesh over vegetables. You would think that God would have known that was coming. And that he wouldn't have given one favor over another one, because that would have caused it.
And I think the old priests who wrote these stories, they wanted to keep these sacrifices coming to that temple in Jerusalem because that kept them from having to do any work.
Right. It's like, where does the money go that you give to the church? It doesn't go to God.
Yeah. And here's another one. Did you know Jesus killed a date tree for not having dates when he wanted some? No lesson there. Jesus just being angry at a tree for not having a fruit out of season, wasn't in season, and then killing it.
Just to show what a bad dude he was.
Yeah, just to show he could be a really bad dude.
Show off his powers.
Yeah.
Also, there's the story of the prophet Elijah, who, when he was teased by some children about being bald, he cursed them in the name of God, and God sent 2 she-bears to rip them apart. And in all, they killed 42 children just for calling a prophet bald and making fun of them.
Yeah, this started to sound too much like election
we should be giving
politics.
these passages out. The one I just read was 2 Kings 2:23-24.
Yeah, and in Judges 19:22-29, the mob demands to be able to rape the godly master's guest. Master can't have that, so he offers his daughter and a concubine to them instead. And they take the concubine and gang rape her all night. The master finds her dead on the doorstep in the morning. He then cuts her into 12 pieces and sends the pieces to the heads of the 12 tribes.
You don't hear preachers preaching that on Sunday mornings.
No, you don't. I wonder why you don't hear that in church.
And how come you never hear the word Jephthah in church? They don't want to talk about human sacrifice in the Bible.
Yeah.
Or in Leviticus 26 or Deuteronomy 28, and Jeremiah 19, where God threatens to punish us by making us eat our own children if we don't obey his commandments. And we're not just talking 10 commandments here. We're talking 613 commandments in the Bible. Deuteronomy and Leviticus are full of them.
Yeah, this is something I have always find puzzling, that the Christians demand, or insist that everybody should follow what we've called the 10 Commandments here before, but you have almost 600 other ones, or you have 600 other ones. I think maybe we say you're not supposed to eat shrimp or lobster, but
Or wear mixed fabric.
Or wear mixed fabric. But it also says that you shouldn't eat something comes out of the waters that doesn't have scales, basically. That means catfish. And I think Tennesseans like their catfish. And so if you've ever eaten catfish, it's just as great a sin as sleeping with somebody of the same sex.
Right, it's an abomination.
Yeah.
And wearing mixed clothing, mixed fabrics or fibers is an abomination as well.
Yeah.
Now, I guess it's your turn.
Yeah, well, there's another story in Exodus 9:12, where Pharaoh's finally about to release the Israelites slaves, but God hardens his heart, taking away his free will in the matter, and keeping him from doing it. That is, keeping him from releasing the slaves. Mm-hmm. Apparently, just so God could release among his 10 plagues the last one and kill the firstborn Egyptian children. I mean, can you imagine somebody being that vicious?
Well, he sends Moses to get his people free from the Egyptians. And here is a Pharaoh about ready to let him go. But no, he takes away his freedom, hardens his heart so he won't, just so that he could then punish the Egyptian children. Not even Pharaoh, just the Egyptian children.
Yeah. Well, the Bible's full of these barbaric, horrific stories. Simple web search will turn up dozens of them.
But why don't you know about these stories? It's your religion. It's what you've been trying your best to foster on the rest of us by using the power of government when you vote for your evangelical candidates.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is promising to unite Americans under one flag and under one God if he gets elected.
I wonder what he's going to do to the people who don't worship that God.
Yeah.
Most people treat the Bible like an end-user license agreement. They just scroll to the bottom and hit approve without reading it. So grow up, take a little responsibility for your own beliefs and your own actions, read what you're signing off on, and see if it really matches up with what you think it does. I bet it won't. Okay, this is the bottom of the hour. We might want to take, well, not really.
No, not really.
We've got 36 minutes, but it's a little slow. Okay.
Remember, it's a call-in show.
Call-in show. Numbers at the bottom of the screen. We've been talking an awful lot about the Bible and what it says. If you have any experience in that area or any comments or questions, feel free to call in. Now, if you think that was bad, and we do,
Yeah.
if you think that an omniscient, omnibenevolent God had our best interest at heart, could have written a better Bible, we do too. And I actually sat down and put pen to paper and created an article about what the Bible could have talked about, it could have said, if in fact he had our best interest at heart. So we're going to go into that next. We'll probably stop about 10 minutes from now and take a break, but we'll get started on it. Okay. What the Bible could have said. It really is just an ancient text written by preachers of a long time ago, which they considered honestly the Bible. If we are unable to believe that it has a supernatural origin. There are several other texts that are older than the Bible, the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Vedic texts, and quite a few that could hold more truths than the Bible, like Shakespeare. To claim that it is the original, unique word of the omnipotent, omniscient deity who only has our welfare in mind and is a perfect moral guide to boot just doesn't stand up to skeptical scrutiny of the text. Take the next one.
So if the Bible really were the inspired word of an omniscient God who loved us and wanted the best for us, would it really have been filled with genocide, plagues, commandments, threats, and acceptable ways to beat your slaves? Rather, wouldn't you expect that he would have taken time to calmly explain the workings of the world and the universe, and then given you reasons to do the things that would actually be beneficial for the future of humanity?
Think just for a minute, if there was an omniscient, benevolent God who really loved us, would he have written anything like the Bible? Of course, a lot of you Christians have not read the Bible, so you don't really know. You know a few of the things from the New Testament. You have a few things you like to cite that shows that your moral character is good. But if you've read any of the Old Testament and most of the New Testament, you know that it's mainly just don't do this, do that, and if you don't, then we'll punish you forever in a lake of fire.
Yeah, and I think you cannot find any place in the Bible that tells you how natural phenomena work in the world. I mean, it has absolutely no information that we know today about, what is a star, what's above. The Bible is a picture. There's a firmament above that separates the waters above from the waters below, and the little holes in it, and the light from heaven passes through those holes, and that's what you think are stars. I mean, it's just nonsensical in that sense, if an omniscient God wrote it.
Yeah, and the only way the apologists address this is say, oh, it was different back then. We actually had water above the sky back then.
Yeah.
No. You've got to look at the universe the way it is and say, in all likelihood, it's been the same way for billions of years. But anyway, instead of the Bible sounding like it was written by a desert war chief with micromanagement complex, the Bible could have sounded something more like this. Yea, though the earth seems steady and flat, yet it is a globe which doth turn round fully once daily. Look to the North Star to witness the hub of its turning extended. The sun is just another star, only much, much closer to you than other stars. The earth is spherical, and along with other planets, circles around the sun, just as the moon circles the earth. The earth, moon, and planets and stars are all thousands of millions of years old.
Yeah. It would have taken God just a few sentences to lay out the foundations of modern astronomy at all. Instead, many a good man like Galileo and Copernicus were persecuted as heretics by the church. Giordano Bruno was put to death for the blasphemy of suggesting that the earth revolves around the sun. This was done by the very people who supposedly had God whispering truth into their ears.
I mean, even the fact that the earth was round was unknown. That stars or other suns was unknown. But an omniscient God could have given them that information in a single sentence.
Yeah, but what you find are the musings of, Bronze Age and Iron Age peoples in the Bible because they didn't know.
Right.
They simply didn't know.
Right. Therefore, God could not know because they wrote the Bible.
Yeah. And so why would God have allowed to write the Bible under his aegis and say things that were absolutely wrong? Who knows?
Right. The Bible could have said.
Oh, we've got a phone call.
Okay, we got a phone call.
Hello, caller. You're on Freethought Forum. Would you like to give us a name or a nickname?
Oh, hey, this is Faithless. I've been watching the show.
Hey,
Faithless.
About the subject. And I thought I would share with you one of the things that I think is wrong with the Bible and what it should have said. And in fact, it's so wrong that the apostles notice it. Jesus tells these stories, these parables they're called, and sometimes they seem to be pointless. Sometimes they almost seem to be at odds with maybe what we would think of as admirable behavior. And the apostles ask him, Master, why do you teach in parables?
Right.
And he answers
In a parable.
something to the effect that, I want you to understand, but I don't want the people to understand.
Yes.
And
That's weird.
So So that seems pretty strange, isn't it? It's like telling it, saying, well, the priests understand what God's want, but you can't talk directly to God. You have to go through the priests.
Well, I think it's terrible on several levels. Well, one is that if his whole point is to bring this news of salvation for people who believe in him, and he's not making his case, or he's making his case deliberately in a way that only some will get it, he is literally acting to consign some people to this hell that the Christians imagine, which is an appalling moral thing, deficiency in Jesus. He is a liar. So what the Bible really should say is, there should be clear stories of, love your neighbor, do well, don't lie, and the New Testament, the Jesus of the New Testament is a big failure when it comes to that. The question about teacher, why do you teach in parables, is out of Matthew, and his immediate reply follows after that, and he's a very disingenuous teacher.
Well, we're gonna.
Well, so that's how the Bible could have been made better. We need clear stories and not these muddled methods.
Yeah, I think there are some mixed factors in there too. For example, the story of the Good Samaritan seems to be kind of straightforward, right? That
It's certainly the best, yes.
Even if it's from a group that is rather despised by the Jews, why Jesus points out there is empathy within everyone, and that they deserve to have some recognition for it. And but you're right about some of the others that are hard to understand. For instance, putting the demons into the Gadarene pigs and driving them off into the sea seems to be a very strange story to me.
Yeah. In fact, that makes you also then ask the question, well, wait a minute, if the Hebrew people were, supposedly following the old law, who would be raising pigs anyway? It underscores the fact that, monotheism was not being practiced via per the Hebrew Bible at that point.
No, the early Hebrews were polytheists. It was only under the insistence of the Jewish priesthood, that they promoted this Yahweh to be the chief God. And it's not that they didn't believe other gods, because what's the first commandment say? You shall have no other gods before me. It tacitly admits there are other gods, that Yahweh just wants to be the chief.
Yeah. And I've often thought that parable of the prodigal son seems to, undermine, let's call it a worth ethic, and as well as it undermines, respecting your parents, which is one of those other 10 commandments. Mm-hmm. Now, the 10 commandments, just because they're 10 commandments, doesn't think we shouldn't accept them blindly either. After all, the 10 commandments should say something like, parents, honor your children, and it fails to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk about how the Bible could have sounded.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a real short break, and then we'll get back into that.
All right, I'll let you go. Hope you have some more calls.
Okay, thank you.
Bye then.
Okay. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern Time. And you can you can also see this streaming online outside the Knoxville area by going to ctvknox.org.
Okay, well, this is a call-in show, and we're live today, October 18th, 2016. Viewers can call in now to the numbers on the screen. We'd be happy to have you call in. Don't be bashful.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets every week. Our meetups are fun for food, drink, and conversation. And the purpose is to supply a venue of community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
Okay.
Go ahead. We'll skip the previews.
No, not going to do the promo? Okay. Well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussion of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month we get together for a book club. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it does help.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Now back to
Okay.
the program.
So let's get back to the program. Well, we kind of left off with saying that God could have said a few things to make it a lot clearer.
Could have pushed their science
Could have
forward millennia.
instead of waiting for, as you say, millennia at least, or centuries at least, for humans to gradually discover what.
With religion holding them back every
with religion holding them back every way. In fact, the Bible could have said something like, "Explore the earth, have no fear of falling off. It is round, and everything on it is pulled toward its center by a force of nature that I will call gravity. Yea, it is the same force that holds the plate upon the table and keeps the planets bound to the sun." Travel and experiment. Record your results so you may build a body of knowledge of the world that will benefit these generations which follow. Since the earth is a sphere, traveling south will reveal stars unknown to you in your native lands.
Go ahead and finish that one.
Okay, deep in the soil may be found signs of beasts which have lived long ago but exist no longer. The patient earth has turned the bones to rock. Indeed, the deeper you dig, the farther back in time the bones will be from. The very history of the earth may be learned by examining it deeply within.
That's
Okay.
so true. Welcome to Freethought Forum. You're on the air. May we have a name or a nickname?
Hey, Charles.
Howdy.
Always good to hear you.
Welcome back.
I was caught a bit of your show, and one of the things I don't see anywhere in the Testament, New or Old, is anything about skin color.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that interesting. That's dealing with the state of the last 300 years of the United States over slavery and so forth. There's absolutely no mention whatsoever about skin color, the importance of skin color.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess I hadn't thought about that before, but you know, these people were from the Middle East. They had close contact with Egyptians and Africans, and it doesn't seem like skin color was a big problem with them.
And yet we seem to have had a big, massive disaster just about 170 years ago in the United States over whether or not people could hold other people
Yeah.
their skin color.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's been
And,
going on a lot longer than 170 years ago.
I was talking
he's
about
talking
the
about Civil War.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that still didn't solve the problem.
No.
So, one of the things I think that should have been in the Bible would have been a combination of people that condemn people solely on the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's,
Yet there isn't there.
Yeah,
no,
very true.
you're right. That's one thing that does not show up in those Jewish stories, and you're absolutely right that it got to be a big problem in this country. It's not that the Bible didn't condone slavery; it certainly did,
That's fair to say.
but it didn't categorize one group or one race of people as being a race that should be enslaved.
And I still find it interesting that people are still trying to deny that one of the principal reasons for the thing on states' rights was the slavery was the right that people were defending. And I just finished several books. One of them was called Apostles of Disunion, which was the Successionist Commission.
Mm.
And they went around rabble rousing for all intents and purposes in most of the states about how the North was going to destroy the South over their right to own slaves. How the black man was going to have the same rights and the same for land and voting and everything as the white folks. God knows what kind of absolute and utter disaster that would be.
Well, there's real fear in the South because there were more slaves than there were non-slaves at the height of that period. And people were genuinely worried that they would be overrun and persecuted, if equal rights were granted to everyone eventually. So
yeah. One of the interesting books I've read recently, so I have right next to me, as a matter of fact, The Liberal Redneck Manifesto by a comedian by the name of Trey Chowder.
Who lives here in Knoxville.
yeah.
Yeah, he lives there in Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever get a chance to get him on the show, do so.
Oh, yeah, we've been trying.
Yeah.
We have put out feelers and tried to get a hold of him.
Yeah, getting back to the states' rights thing that you mentioned, it was brought up, of course, all the time I was growing up, simply because the Southerners wanted to maintain Jim Crow laws. They did not want to have the federal government dictating the rights of people in their states.
Yeah, and the whole states' rights thing is based on an interpretation of that which isn't specifically given to the federal government
Yeah,
or to the states.
right. The rights not specifically given to the federal government are reserved to the states.
And so they argued that, but the primary problem is that their concept of slavery was in direct conflict with what the first 10 Amendments were about.
Mm-hmm.
And the economic changes that were going on in the North versus still agrarian society, in the South primarily agrarian society in the South.
Yes, as the North was becoming industrialized.
What was funny was that during this big dust-up coming up, leading up to the Civil War, so many Southern preachers were pounding the Bible saying that slavery was supported by the Bible. Now, they didn't specifically mention in the Bible about skin color, but they were definitely using the Bible as a support for slavery and
Yes.
the reason not to overthrow it.
Well, the Southern Baptist Convention was specifically formed because the Baptists were worried that the Northerners wanted to allow black people into their churches, and so they specifically split off to maintain that segregation. And today, that's the largest Protestant denomination there is, although they still no longer push segregationism. In fact, I think one of the leaders has been a black fellow. But they had to be dragged kicking and screaming into that position.
It was it still is a serious problem in many areas because the most segregated time in the week is Sunday mornings. When you look on TV and you look at all the large evangelical shows and so forth, they're either lily white or jet black, but
Yeah,
you don't seem to see a whole lot of mixing.
yeah, that's it's changing, but slowly. I don't know. Anyhow, well, yeah, those are very good comments, Charles. Thank you for calling in, and we appreciate having you do this. We like talking to you.
Always good to hear from you.
Okay. Catch you later.
Thank you.
Okay.
we've got so many of these. I think I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
But let's jump to the point that he was trying to make. The Bible could have said that all humans are my children, no matter what sex, color, or how they choose to acknowledge me, or indeed if they choose to acknowledge me at all. I am a perfect being, therefore I do not care for adoration or worship. All people, men and women, must be given equality under the law. With one word from God, he could have established the equality of sexes, and outlawed racism. Think of it: who benefits more from adoration and worship, a perfect being, or the priests and preachers of a particular religion who claim to represent him?
Yeah, and why, if you're the only omnipotent, all-powerful God, do you need worship?
Why do you need anything?
Yeah, why do you need anything from anybody?
And just as an aside, why would he give humanity foreskins and then demand that we cut them off? I mean, that makes no sense at all.
Yeah. Well, I think that was to another one of the priestly innovations, for the ancient Hebrews, so they could distinguish themselves.
But why would God want that?
No. That's well. Here's another thing I've always wondered about. People who have gone through the centuries suffering terrible diseases and various maladies, and all the time the Bible could have told us how to take care of those and what caused those. For example, the Bible could have said, when you receive a wound or a cut, you pour distilled alcohol on it, and they knew how to make distilled alcohol, believe me. Else it starts to fester and spoil due to extremely small plants and animals, which I call germs. That's God speaking. Those germs are indeed so tiny they cannot be seen, but their effects on flesh and food can be terrible, and those effects are easily observed. To prevent these harmful effects, wash yourself regularly, hands and face. Most often, care for the sick. Physicians, wash your hands after seeing each patient, lest the germs from one be carried to the next. One day your experiments and inventions will allow you to see these very small organisms. God could have laid the ground for us to understand the germ theory of disease. Just the Civil War alone, hundreds of thousands of people could have been spared excruciating pain, suffering, and death if the surgeons had just washed their hands between the surgeries. And that's, there were two large cases of plague. I think one in the 5th century and one about 13th century, and the latter wiped out about a third of the population of Europe. And people didn't know what was causing them, right? They believed that it was God's punishment on demons on an insufficiently pious group of people, insufficient pious humanity. And so that's one thing that the Bible could have told them about, right? And it didn't.
And he could have said, before eating, this is God speaking, he could have said, before eating, be sure to clean your hands and eating tools thoroughly, lest the germs find their way into your food and cause disease. By slow and steady cooking, food and water may be made safe from these tiny parasites that dwell within. Milk, too, may be made safe this way. Measure it 7 times 70 beats of your heart, and that will be sufficient in duration for boiling to be effective. Thou canst eat pork, sheep, and shellfish whenever thou likest. Just cook it well first. Moreover, thou shalt cook all thy meat and fish well until thou mayest develop a deep understanding of germs and parasites. God could have given us the basis for proper nutrition. Instead, he forbade the ingestion of pork, shrimp, and lobster. How many people had to suffer hunger and malnutrition when a ready food supply may have been at hand?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know exactly, why that prohibition crept into the Jewish canon or not. Whether it just felt some sort of revulsion for.
Well, maybe it's just because that type of food goes bad so quickly that a lot of people were getting sick and dying from eating bad shellfish and fish. simple word that, an omniscient God who cared for us could have put that to rest.
Yeah, that's quite true. Of course, they did eat fish, but as I say, fish with scales on that. So there must be something else that goes through the minds of people who write this stuff. That what they do is they project their own feelings onto God all the time.
Do you have one that you particularly like?
Well, I don't know. I have these back there. How many? Yeah. Okay. Well, Bible. We already talked about diseases that are caused by malnutrition or by germs, etc.
Well, it goes farther than that, though. If you'd like to, I'll go ahead and read that if you don't mind.
Well, I'll get down a little farther there. He could have said, I will not send flood or storm against thee, for I love thee. These are caused by the natural heating and cooling of the earth's airs, not by your loving God. How many shamans and imams and preachers have ascribed diseases and other natural events to their gods in order to ensure obedience to their wishes? And they're still doing today. Just look at Pat Robertson. How many virgins were sacrificed at the hands of some witch doctor because people were afraid their God would do something to their people if the sacrifice were not made? What I find astonishing about this is that even today you can find people who will tell you that God controls the weather, right?
Pat Robertson.
Robertson, Jerry Falwell, after the world, in anticipation of a gay pride march in Orlando, said God's going to bring a hurricane or a tornado or something of the sort. And I even find people writing letters to the editor in the paper today, local people, talking about how God is controlling the weather, etc.
Well, even insurance companies call it the act of God.
Act of God.
It's endemic in our society.
Yeah, there's a story about that. Mike Huckabee, who is a perennial presidential candidate these days, when he was governor of Arkansas, he made the insurance company take those words out of insurance policies there. Yeah, says, because that's not my God. Those are not acts, not what I call acts of God.
And the Bible could have said also that since the information inside the Bible would have been so extremely important, that I will make this book indestructible and available to every person on the planet in their language free. And for those who cannot read, I will have it speak to them in their native tongue. I will not allow it to be misinterpreted or misrepresented. So I will simultaneously update all copies from time to time as your understanding grows, for it is well within my powers to do so. This paragraph would have ended all holy wars and atheism, because there would have been ample proof of the existence and presence and power of an almighty being if he could do that.
Yeah, and which brings up a good point as to why there are so many religions and belief systems in the world. If there are
so many different gods, so many different interpretations.
Right.
So many holy books that everybody reads differently.
Right, and if there were only one omniscient, omnipresent God, everywhere, that wouldn't be the case. I mean, people would be unified about religion, but they're not.
Right.
So people make up their own gods.
The most divisive force in humanity.
Yeah, and of course, fought several wars over it, and people with their different views of God, and we have wars going on right now.
Think of even religion like Islam.
Yeah.
It immediately divides. You got your Shia and your Sunni.
Right.
And then each one of them has their own little sect. S-E-C-T-S, sects.
Yeah. So anyhow, the certainly could have, pointed out that the priesthood of every man in a sense, what the Protestant Reformation was all about. That is, that you didn't have to be controlled one man higher up, and you didn't have these intermediates between the common man and the God. Okay? And there may be a little bit of that in Jesus' teachings, but there's certainly not a lot of it at all in the Old Testament.
And it certainly grew out of Jesus' teachings as well as the Old Testament.
Yeah. And getting back to what Lee was talking about, to some of the things Jesus said and promoted, you have to remember that Jesus didn't really found a religion. Paul founded Christianity. Right. Without Paul, there's no Christianity. Right. And so he pretty much decided what the beliefs were supposed to be, I think.
And that's another thing, beliefs. That's why I put this particular paragraph in here. God could have said that you should treat all people and indeed all life with kindness, compassion, and respect, for I have made you in my image whole and unspoiled. You will be judged by your actions, not for your ability to believe the unbelievable. No matter how much religious people claim that being good is the basis for getting into heaven, the actual criteria laid out in the Bible is belief. Believe in Jesus, accept him as your Savior, and you're in. Doing bad stuff, no problem. You're forgiven. Just believe. And that's a real problem I have with it. They always say you got to be a good person to get to heaven, but theoretically Jeffrey Dahmer is in heaven. He accepted Jesus in prison before he was killed.
Yeah, it depends a little. Catholic churches puts higher value on good works than Protestants, particularly evangelicals and fundamentalists. They say you only have to believe in Jesus.
Right.
And I presume that you've seen this bumper sticker at some time that says, Christians aren't perfect, just forgiven.
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that has just always galled me, because they will tell you, well, atheists are just atheists because they don't want to believe in God and put any shackles on themselves,
right.
So they can do whatever they
want.
want.
But it's even better if you're a Christian, because you can do anything you want to and ask for forgiveness,
right.
And there you are.
Exactly.
So what's the difference?
Exactly. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That and I've never been able to really understand that. That's it seems to me that the people who decide that, well, they may not decide it in advance that they're going to do something bad and then try to pray to get rid of it, but they just often don't act very Christian-like towards other people, and they will do things from time to time that tempt it, but just to saying, well, you can do what you want as long as you ask for forgiveness,
right.
You'll be forgiven.
They've institutionalized that in the Christian church, in the Catholic church. Do what
Yeah.
you want all weekend, and then the weekend go in and confess it to a priest.
Yeah.
Wipe your slate clean and
so
go out and do it again.
So what it does, it keeps that grip on people, that guilt feeling.
Right. And also think about all the power it gives the priest to know all of your secrets.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's about time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback. You can leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show every Tuesday from 5 to 6, most Tuesdays, in this Knoxville station, or streaming online at ctvknox.org.
Okay. Well, we'd like to send our thanks to Riv and Forrest for technical support, and to the staff at CTV KNOX, and to all our callers. Remember, examine your beliefs. If they're real, you have nothing to fear from examination.
See you next week.